Hello, all you positive heads out there. It's so good to be back with all you beautiful reflections of the one source consciousness that creates and animates all things. If you're new to this podcast, of course, we're super happy to have you here. And if you've been listening and enjoying for a while, I would be super grateful if you would please take a moment to give us a review on Apple Podcasts. It's one of the best and simplest ways to pay it forward and help others find the show so that they too can tap into the powerful perspectives and positive vibrations we are collectively emanating. The other unique and magical way to share this show is by sending any friends you think would benefit from listening to this podcast our Game with the Universe link at positivehead.com/game. Also listed in the show notes, which will serve them up a quote-unquote random episode when they click it. Just instruct them before clicking the link to close their eyes for a moment and sincerely ask the universe to cue up the episode that contains the insight and perspectives that they most need to hear at this point in their life journey, and then click to listen to whatever episode is synchronistically served up to them. I have heard time and time again from people about the incredible results they received playing the game. So just tell your friends magical results are guaranteed or their karma back. All right, all you positive heads, welcome back to another episode of the Positive Head Podcast. So happy to be here with you all to connect yet again. And we are going to continue with the previous episode. If you listened, you know we started The Power of Awareness by Neville Goddard, written in 1952. And I've decided to basically to read this book over the next several episodes. We'll talk about it a little bit. I'll chime in with my 2 cents, get an idea of what, this is a classic book here and perfect one to share on the show. And great thing about it, of course, is it's something you don't have to have read it necessarily in order. Picking up anywhere on any episode where we're reading, you will definitely get good stuff out of it. So without further ado, I'm just going to jump right in and pick up on Chapter 4 of The Power of Awareness by Neville Goddard. This chapter is titled Desire. The changes which take place in your life as a result of your changed concept of yourself always appear to the unenlightened to be the result not of a change of your consciousness, but of chance, outer cause, or coincidence. However, the only fate governing your life is the fate determined by your own concepts, your own assumptions. For an assumption, though false, if persisted in, will harden into fact. The ideal you seek and hope to attain will not manifest itself, will not be realized by you until you have imagined that you are already that ideal. There is no escape for you except by a radical psychological transformation of yourself, except by your assumption of the feeling of your wish fulfilled. Therefore, make results or accomplishments the crucial test of your ability to use your imagination. Everything depends on your attitude towards yourself. That which you will not affirm as true of yourself can never be realized by you, for the attitude alone is the necessary condition by which you realize your goal. All transformation is based upon suggestion, and this can work only when you lay yourself completely open to an influence. You must abandon yourself to your ideal as a woman abandons herself to love. For complete abandonment of self to it is the way to union with your ideal. You must assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled until your assumption has all the sensory vividness of reality. You must imagine that you are already experiencing what you desire. That is, you must assume the feeling of the fulfillment of your desire until you are possessed by it, and this feeling crowds all other ideas out of your consciousness. The man who is not prepared for the conscious plunge into the assumption of the wish fulfilled in the faith that it is the only way to the realization of his dream is not yet ready to live consciously by the law of assumption, although there is no doubt that he does live by the law of assumption unconsciously. But for you who accept this principle and are ready to live by consciously assuming that your wish is already fulfilled, the adventure of life begins. To reach a higher level of being, you must assume a higher concept of yourself. If you will not imagine yourself as other than what you are, then you remain as you are. For if you believe not that I am he, ye shall die in your sins. If you do not believe that you are he, the person you want to be, then you remain as you are. Through the faithful, systematic cultivation of the feeling of the wish fulfilled, desire becomes the promise of its own fulfillment. The assumption of the feeling of the wish fulfilled makes the future dream a present fact. I love how he seems to be using Bible verses throughout. And of course, you know, when you take a look at the Bible, a lot of times it's used sort of as in opposition to a lot of these beliefs, right? God is controlling all things, and you know, you need to worship God, and you don't really have the power. And actually, when you take a look at a lot of these verses, there's it's all about interpretation, right? And even you look at a lot of Jesus's quotes, they're supporting these things, supporting a lot of these ideas that you actually have the power, that everything is made of light, that you and the Father are one. And when you start understanding and really sort of seeing these verses from a little different perspective than maybe the way they're typically taught in organized religion, Christian tradition, it is very empowering, right? It's that leads very nicely into the next chapter, the truth that sets you free. The drama of life is a psychological one in which all the conditions, circumstances, and events of your life are brought to pass by your assumptions. Since your life is determined by your assumptions, you are forced to recognize the fact that you are either a slave to your assumptions or their master. To become the master of your assumptions is the key to undreamed of freedom and happiness. You can attain this mastery by deliberate, conscious control of your imagination. You determine your assumption in this way. Form a mental image, a picture of the state desired of the person you want to be. Concentrate your attention upon the feeling that you're already that person. First, visualize the picture in your consciousness, then feel yourself to be in that state as though it actually formed your surrounding world. By your imagination, that which was a mere mental image is changed into a seemingly solid reality. The great secret is a controlled imagination and a well-sustained attention firmly and repeatedly focused on the object to be accomplished. Quick side note here. We've all heard of The Secret, right? This was written in 1952. I think you can probably see where a lot of the inspiration came from, right? And I believe, without looking it up or anything, I had heard that before and kind of forgotten about it. But yeah, he refers to The Great Secret, and he was definitely talking about it a long, long time ago. And, I also think of Esther Hicks Abraham, who talks about this, and basically what Abraham says is holding something in your vibrational, in holding the vibration of something for 17 seconds is more powerful than putting in, 40 hours of work on, creating something. So that's an interesting idea. So not only drumming up the feeling, but then holding that vibration, practicing holding that vibration is super, super powerful. Okay, picking right back up. It cannot be emphasized too much that by creating an ideal within your mental sphere, by assuming that you're already that ideal, you identify yourself with it and thereby transform yourself into its image. This was called by the ancient teachers subjection to the will of God, or resting in the Lord. And the only true test of resting in the Lord is that all who do rest are inevitably transformed into the image of that in which they rest. You become according to your resigned will, and your resigned will is your concept of yourself and all that you consent to and accept as true. You, assuming the feeling of your wish fulfilled and continuing therein, take upon yourself the results of that state. Not assuming the feeling of your wish fulfilled, you are ever free of the results. When you understand the redemptive function of imagination, you hold in your hands the key to the solution of all your problems. Every phase of your life is made by the exercise of your imagination. Determined imagination alone is the means of your progress, of the fulfilling of your dreams. It is the beginning and end of all creating. The great secret is a controlled imagination and a well-sustained attention firmly and repeatedly focused on the feeling of the wish fulfilled until it fills the mind and crowds all other ideas out of consciousness. What greater gifts could be given you than to be told the truth that will set you free? The truth that sets you free is that you can experience in imagination what you desire to experience in reality. And by maintaining this experience in imagination, your desire will become an actuality. You are limited only by your uncontrolled imagination and lack of attention to the feeling of your wish fulfilled. When the imagination, let me stop there actually. Say that again. You are limited only by your uncontrolled imagination and lack of attention to the feeling of your wish fulfilled. Or I would even go so far as to say by a lot of times focusing on that which we don't want. Hey, I know I want this. So then I instantly turn myself to the lack of what I want. So that's a very interesting point that Abraham has also made. You know, a lot of times you'll want something and you get it easily if you don't care that much about it, something little, right? Because you're not focused on the lack of having it. You think I want it and let it go. But if you really want something, then you instantly were trained in our society to start sort of focus on, well, I really want $1 million, and now I can see very clearly that I have $10, right? And I'm focused on the lack of what's missing about it. And, and then of course, not even knowing how any of this works, your uncontrolled imagination just wreaks havoc in your world, right? So this becomes a very careful sort of science, right, for us to focus on and really understand how all this stuff works and how to start becoming a master of imagination and controlling our thoughts. And of course, it's not going to always, you're going to have moments, no doubt, where you slip into negative thinking or uncontrolled imagination in a negative way. But just being aware of the process is so powerful in itself, right? Okay, picking back up. When the imagination is not controlled and the attention not steadied on the feeling of the wish fulfilled, then no amount of prayer or piety or invocation will produce the desired effect. When you can call up at will whatsoever image you please, when the forms of your imagination are as vivid to you as the forms of nature, you are master of your fate. Visions of beauty and splendor, forms of a long-lost race, sounds and faces and voices, from the fourth dimension of space, and on through the universe boundless, our thoughts go lightning-shod. Some call it imagination, and others call it God. Great ending there. Little poem, chapter 5 ending, moving into chapter 6, attention. Starts with a little Bible quote again. A double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. James 1:8. Attention is forceful in proportion to the narrowness of its focus. That is, when it is obsessed with a single idea or sensation. It is steady and powerfully focused only by such an adjustment of the mind as permits you to see one thing only, for you steady the attention and increase its power by confining it. The desire which realizes itself is always a desire upon which attention is exclusively concentrated, for an idea is endowed with power only in proportion to the degree of attention fixed on it. Concentrated observation is the attentive attitude directed towards some specific end. The attentive attitude involves selection, for when you pay attention, it signifies that you have decided to focus your attention on one object or state rather than on another. Therefore, when you know what you want, you must deliberately focus your attention on the feeling of your wish fulfilled until that feeling fills the mind and crowds all other ideas out of consciousness. The power of attention is the measure of your inner force. Concentrated observation of one thing shuts out other things and causes them to disappear. The great secret of success is to focus the attention on the feeling of the wish fulfilled without permitting any distraction. All progress depends upon an increase of attention. The ideas which impel you to action are those which dominate the consciousness, those which possess the attention. This one thing I do, forgetting those things that are behind, I press toward the mark. This means this one thing you can do, forgetting those things that are behind. You can press toward the mark of fulfilling your mind with the feeling of the wish fulfilled. To the unenlightened man, this will seem to be all fantasy, yet all progress comes from those who do not take the accepted view, nor accept the world as it is. As we stated heretofore, if you can imagine what you please, and if the forms of your thoughts are as vivid as the forms of nature, you are by virtue of the power of your imagination, master of your fate. Your imagination is you yourself and the world as your imagination sees it as the real world. When you set out to master the movements of attention, which must be done if you would successfully alter the course of observed events, it is then you realize how little control you exercise over your imagination and how much it is dominated by sensory impressions and by a drifting on the tides of idle moods. To aid in mastering the control of your attention, practice this exercise. Night after night, just before you drift off to sleep, strive to hold your attention on the activities of the day in reverse order. Focus your attention on the last thing you did. That is, getting into bed, and then move it backwards in time over the events until you reach the first event of the day, getting out of bed. This is no easy exercise, but just as specific exercises greatly help in developing specific muscles, this will greatly help in developing the muscle of your attention. Your attention must be developed, controlled, and concentrated in order to change your concept of yourself successfully and thereby change your future. Imagination is able to do anything, but only according to the internal direction of your attention. If you persist night after night, sooner or later you will awaken in yourself a center of power and become conscious of your greater self, the real you. Attention is developed by repeated exercise or habit. Through habit, an action becomes easier, and so, in course of time, gives rise to a facility or faculty, which can then be put to higher uses. When you attain control of the internal direction of your attention, you will no longer stand in shallow water, but will launch out into the deep of life. You'll walk in the assumption of the wish fulfilled, as on a foundation more solid even than earth. That's the end of chapter 6. Makes me think of where attention goes, energy flows. Obviously, we want to really get good at controlling, right? Controlling these thoughts, becoming like a laser focus. And what a great exercise. I've never done that one. I look forward to trying it, but I can totally see, just imagining now, what that would be like and how that would really help you to sort of develop this muscle, sort of as he speaks, right? Or as he suggests. All right, let's do one more today. Experiments recently conducted by Merle Lawrence. This is chapter 7, Attitude. Experiments recently conducted by Merle Lawrence at Princeton and Adelbert Ames of Dartmouth in the Ladder Psychology Laboratory at Hanover, New Hampshire, prove that what you see when you look at something depends not so much on what is there as on the assumption you make when you look. Since what we believe to be the real physical world is actually only an assumptive world, it is not surprising that these experiments prove that what appears to be solid reality is actually the result of expectations or assumptions. Your assumptions determine not only what you see, but also what you do, for they govern all your conscious and subconscious movements toward the fulfillment of themselves. Over a century ago, this truth was stated by Emerson as follows. As the world was plastic and fluid in the hands of God, so it is ever too so much of his attributes as we bring to it. To ignorance and sin, it is flint. They adapt themselves to it as they may, but in proportion as a man has anything in him divine, the firmament flows before him and takes his signet and form. Your assumption is the hand of God molding the firmament into the image of that which you assume. The assumption of the wish fulfilled is the high tide which lifts you easily off the bar of the senses where you have so long lain stranded. It lifts the mind into prophecy in the full right sense of the word. And if you have that controlled imagination and absorbed attention where it is possible to attain, you may be sure that all your assumptions implies will come to pass. When William Blake wrote, "What seems to be is to those to whom it seems to be," he was only repeating the eternal truth. There's nothing unclean of itself, but to him that esteemeth anything to be unclean, to him it is unclean. And that's Romans 14:14. Because there's nothing unclean of itself or clean of itself. You should assume the best and think only of that which is lovely and of good report. It is not superior insight, but ignorance of this law of assumption if you read into the greatness of men some littleness with which you may be familiar, or into some situation or circumstance an unfavorable conviction. Your particular relationship to another influences your assumption with respect to what others and makes you see in him that which you do see. If you can change your opinion of another, that which you now believe of him cannot be absolutely true, but is only relatively true. The following is an actual case history illustrating how the law of assumption works. One day, a costume designer described to me her difficulties in working with a prominent theatrical producer. She was convinced that he unjustly criticized and rejected her best work, and that often he was deliberately rude and unfair to her. Upon hearing her story, I explained that if she found the other rude and unfair, it was a sure sign that she herself was wanting, and that it was not the producer but herself that was in need of a new attitude. I told her that the power of this law of assumption and its practical application could be discovered only through experience, and that only by assuming that the situation was already what she wanted it to be could she prove that she could bring about the change desired. Her employer was merely bearing witness, telling her by his behavior what her concept of him was. I suggested that it was quite probable that she was carrying on conversation with him in her mind, which were filled with criticism and recriminations. There was no doubt but that she was mentally arguing with the producer, for others only echo that which we whisper to them in secret. I asked her if it was not true that she talked to him mentally, and if so, what those conversations were like. She confessed that every morning on her way to the theater, she told him just what she thought of him in a way she would never have dared address him in person. The intensity and force of her mental arguments, which with him automatically established his behavior towards her. She began to realize that all of us carry on mental conversations, but unfortunately, on most occasions, these conversations are argumentative, that we have only to observe the passerby on the street to prove this assertion, that so many people are mentally engrossed in conversation and few appear to be happy about it. But the very intensity of their feeling must lead them quickly to the unpleasant incident they themselves have mentally created and therefore must now encounter. When she realized what she had been doing, she agreed to change her attitude and to live this law faithfully by assuming that her job was highly satisfactory and her relationship with the producer was a very happy one. To do this, she agreed that before going to sleep at night, on her way to work, and at other intervals during the day, she would imagine that he had congratulated her on her fine designs and that she, in turn, had thanked him for the praise and kindness. To her great delight, she soon discovered for herself that her own attitude was the cause of all that befell her. The behavior of her employer miraculously reversed itself. His attitude, echoing, as it had always done, that which he had assumed, now reflected her changed concept of him. What she did was, by the power of her imagination, her persistent assumption influenced his behavior and determined his attitude toward her. With the passport of desire and on the wings of a controlled imagination, she traveled into the future of her own predetermined experience. Thus, we see it as not facts, but that which we create in our imagination which shapes our lives. For most of the conflicts of the day are due to the want of a little imagination to cast the beam out of our own eye. It is the exact and literal minded who live in a fictitious world. As this designer, by her controlled imagination, started the subtle change in her employer's mind, so can we, by the control of our imagination and wisely directed feeling, solve our problems. By the intensity of her imagination and feeling, the designer cast a kind of enchantment on her producer's mind and caused him to think that his generous praise originated with him. Often, our most elaborate and original thoughts are determined by another. We should never be certain that it was not some woman treading in the wine press who began that subtle change in men's mind, or that the passion did not begin in the mind of some shepherd boy, lighting up his eyes for a moment before it ran upon its way. And that's William Butler Yeats. What a powerful chapter, right? So powerful. It makes me think of a story. Actually, you guys can go back. I think we called it a sister story or a sister's tale or something, where I had my sister on the show like a year ago. Same exact thing. She worked for a woman who was really just hard on her, brutal. Her and I had a deep conversation about this. She started changing her perception, not taking it personally, moving out of that sort of reactive state and anger state. And now that, even to this day, that woman absolutely loves her. She completely transformed. You know, it's something that you can play with your partner, with your children, with your employee, with your employer. Start playing with this power that you have. They are a reflection. They're showing up. It's not happening to you. You're happening to it. Everyone is just a reflection in your private movie. You are the star and, director of your own movie. Start writing characters that are more enjoyable if you're not enjoying them. Why are you writing them in that way? And it's such an empowering thing when you start to understand this. All right, guys, as I mentioned before, while we're going through the power of awareness, I'm going to mix it up a bit. And instead of leaving you with a song, I'm going to end each episode with a nano tap with a lovely Sonia Sophia from the World Tapping Circle. This one is called From Anxious to Ah, Relaxing Nano Tap.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sonia Sophia. And we're going to do another nano tap. This one's called From Anxious to Ah. Are you ready? Follow along with me and let's see if we can bring you some more peace from where you might be feeling worried or anxious about some aspect of your life. So think about what's stressing you out and making you feel anxious. Keep that in mind as we tap. Here we go. Repeat after me. Even though I feel anxious about, big deep breath, I'm open to loving and accepting myself. Tap the eyebrows, this anxious feeling. Tap the temples, this anxiety. Tap the cheeks, part of me feels really anxious. Tap under the nose. I acknowledge this part of me that feels anxious. Big deep breath, just tuning into that part of you that feels anxious. Tap under the lips, this anxious feeling. Tap the chest. I love and accept myself even if I continue to feel anxious about this. Big deep breath. Good. Moving down to the front of the rib cage, this anxious feeling. Big noisy breath. I love and respect myself even though part of me continues to feel anxious. Moving up to the side of the ribs, this anxiety about, say what it is that's making you feel so anxious. Tap the inside of the wrist. Part of me wants to relax and another part of me doesn't know how. Okay, we're going to jump to the top of the head. This part of me that doesn't know how to relax. I love and accept myself even if this part of me continues to worry. Back of the head, sides of the head, eyebrows. Ready? Big soft breath. And tap the temples. I forgive myself for having this anxiety in my body. Tap the cheeks, especially in my, and say where you feel the anxiety. Maybe it's your head or your stomach. Tap under the nose. I'm releasing the stress from my, and then say where it is again. And breathe. And tap under the lips. This remaining anxiety, tuning into it again and breathing. Just accepting it as it is. Tap the chest. I'm releasing this remaining anxiety. And the front of the ribs, one more time. This remaining anxiety about, say, your situation. And up to the side of the ribs, I love and respect myself even if a part of me holds on to this and doesn't know how to let go yet. Tap the inside of the wrist. I'm teaching myself that it's safe to be here right now. Tapping the top of the head. I'm allowing myself to feel safe in my body and to release the stress about this for now. Good. How do you feel? Hopefully that brought some of your anxiety down. If not, rewind it, do it again, and consider joining us in the World Tapping Circle for much deeper taps that will help you really process. Thank you so much.